The sun beat down mercilessly on the corner of Market Street and Powell Street in San Francisco. A man weathered by years on the streets sat cross-legged on the sidewalk. His clothes were tattered, his face framed by a scraggly beard, and hollow eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Passers-by hurried past him, eyes glued to their phones or the pavement, as if avoiding the sight of his humanity made him less real. He wasn't an unfamiliar figure in this part of the city. Locals knew him simply as that guy on the corner. No one ever stopped to ask his name, though some had occasionally tossed spare change into his battered coffee cup. His sign, scribbled hastily on a torn piece of cardboard, typically read, "Hungry and tired." Anything helps, but today was different. Today the sign bore an audacious plea. "Elon, I need help to change my life." It wasn't a desperate ploy for attention. It was a last-ditch effort, a Hail Mary from a man who felt he had nothing left to lose. He had spent the last 2 nights awake rehearsing the words he would say if Musk actually appeared. His heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread. The idea of holding that sign had come to him during one of his rare moments of quiet reflection. He had read about Elon Musk, how the billionaire often touted his willingness to help humanity solve its toughest problems. Surely this was a problem worth solving. Hours passed. He sat there, a mixture of doubt and determination growing with each second, and then it happened. A sleek Tesla pulled up to the curb just a few feet away. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Musk himself. Wearing trousers and a simple black t-shirt, he exuded an unpretentious yet captivating presence. The man froze, clutching the edges of his placard. As he watched Musk look around as if looking for something or someone on the street, his breath seized in his throat. Would this be the turning point in his life? Elon Musk's eyes briefly fell on the man as his fingers clenched around the cardboard. The world appeared to blur around them as the millionaire paused, his brows furrowing slightly as he took in the audacious words scrawled on the placard. "Is this for real?" Musk questioned, his tone more inquisitive than doubtful as the sounds of passing cars and distant traffic merged into the background. The man forced himself to speak, even though his voice was stuck in his throat due to nerves in the afternoon heat. He spoke incoherently, but with a genuine sense of desperation, saying, "I'm just trying to get out of this. I don't want handouts. I want a chance." Musk said nothing, but instead he looked at the man with a rare kind of focus, as if he were solving an equation in his head. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt down and brought himself up to eye level. "What's your name?" Musk asked Thomas, and the man responded. His voice faltered, but there was a glimmer of pride at being recognized as more than a nameless figure. "On the street is fine." In his tone, Thomas Musk continued, "Tell me your story. How did you get here?" Thomas was hesitant to answer ambiguously, quickly, or palatably, but something about Musk's presence forced him to be honest. So he told him about a life that had once seemed promising, a stable job as a mechanic in his 20s, a wife he loved, and a modest San Bernardino home. Then came the layoffs, the foreclosure, and the disintegration of everything he had built. One poor choice led to another, and before he knew it, years had passed. Thomas acknowledged, his voice breaking. "But I'm not a bad guy. I simply need someone to think that I'm capable of more." Musk nodded carefully, taking in all that was said. He inquired as to what you would do with it and how you would make it matter if I were to assist you. Thomas gulped hard. He had given it a lot of thought, but he hadn't anticipated coming this far, much less being asked such a question. He suggested that I create a tiny but sincere business, perhaps repairing old appliances or bikes that people toss away that could still be helpful. Thomas prepared himself for rejection, while Musk stood wiping invisible dust from his jeans. His face was unreadable. However, Musk took his phone out of his pocket and started typing, "Here's what I'm going to do." Musk spoke in a forceful voice. "There's a catch to the $20,000 I'm giving you." Thomas's breath caught somewhere between cautious optimism and bewilderment as his jaw relaxed. $20,000. Musk's subsequent remarks struck like a lightning bolt, bringing the situation to reality. The catch is that you can't use it for short-term remedies, even though that amount of money was more than he had ever dared to imagine. No food, no rent, and no easy fixes. Musk stated that the funds must be used to create a life-altering, sustainable project. Not only today, but also in the next years. With the offer's weight settling in, Thomas blinked and stammered. Consider it. Musk kept pacing a little as though he were giving a TED talk to a single person. You stated that you wanted a chance, not a handout, so prove it. Take this money and make it into something lasting. You'll have to figure out how, but if you're serious, I'll be watching. Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Musk nodded. Let's just say, I'll check in if you can show me you've used it well. There might be more where that came from, but if you waste it, let the sentence trail off. For a moment, Thomas felt the familiar pang of self-doubt. Could he really pull this off? What if he failed? But then he remembered the years he'd spent sitting on that corner, waiting for life to change. Here it was his moment. He couldn't let fear rob him of it. I'll do it, he said, his voice steadier. Now I'll prove it. Musk smiled faintly and tapped a few more buttons on his phone. A ping sounded on Thomas's cheap flip phone, the one he'd barely managed to keep activated. Thomas pulled it from his pocket, his hands trembling. There it was, a transfer for $20,000, real immediate good luck, Musk said, stepping back toward his car. And remember, you asked for this. The Tesla door shut with a quiet click, and just like that, Musk was gone, leaving Thomas standing on the sidewalk with more hope and pressure than he'd ever felt in his life. Thomas frozen on the corner, the notification still glowing on his phone. The weight of the moment hit him like a wave. $20,000. It was more money than he had touched in over a decade, yet it felt heavier than gold. Musk's words echoed in his mind. This money has to go toward building something sustainable. He knew what he wanted to do, but wanting and executing were two very different things. Thomas's first stop was the local public library, a place he hadn't set foot in for years. It was quiet and cool inside, the scent of old books mingling with the faint hum of computers. He approached a librarian, a kind-looking woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose. I need to look up. I'm starting a business, Thomas said, feeling his cheeks flush with embarrassment. The woman didn't judge. She lead him to a computer, patiently explaining how to use the search engine and navigate resources. Thomas spent hours there poring over articles, YouTube tutorials, and small business forums. The idea took shape in his mind, a repair shop. He didn't need a fancy storefront, just a small space, maybe a few tools, and his hands. He had always been good at fixing things. Whether it was bikes, radios, or old vacuum cleaners, people needed that kind of service, especially in a city like San Francisco, where the cost of replacing things was often too steep. The next day, he walked into a hardware store, his heart pounding. He bought a few basic tools, a screwdriver set, a soldering kit, and a second-hand workbench. Every penny he spent felt like a risk, but it also felt like a step forward with the remaining money. He found a rundown storage unit in Long Beach, one that the owner was willing to rent for cheap since it had been vacant for months. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a spark of pride. He spent his days cleaning out the unit, fixing up discarded items he found on curbs, and spreading the word about his services. He crafted a handwritten sign that he posted on community boards and local coffee shops, affordable repairs, bikes, appliances, and more. Call Thomas. He even listed his number, hoping someone would take a chance on him, and someone did. Thomas's first customer was a middle-aged man named Richard, who showed up at the storage unit with a busted microwave. Found it in my garage. Thought I'd see if you could make it work again. Richard said, his voice skeptical but not unkind. Thomas carefully examined the microwave, his fingers steady as they maneuvered through the mess of wires and components. Years of fixing things came rushing back to him within an hour. The microwave hummed to life, and Richard's raised eyebrows turned into a wide grin. Man, you're good, Richard said, handing over $40. I'll tell my neighbors about you. That first payment, though. Modest felt monumental. It wasn't just the money. It was proof that he could still contribute. Still matter. Word began to spread slowly, but surely. Thomas's small repair business grew one job at a time. A wobbly bike here, a broken toaster there. His phone buzzed with more calls than he'd received in years, and for the first time he didn't dread answering it. But not everything went smoothly. The tools he bought weren't top-notch, and they broke more often than he expected. Some customers never returned for their repaired items, leaving him with unpaid work. And then there were the days when business dried up completely and the doubt crept back in. whispering that maybe he was in over his head one afternoon after a particularly frustrating day. Thomas sat on the floor of the storage unit, staring at a broken sewing machine. He couldn't figure out, his hands shook with exhaustion and tears welled up in his eyes. What if Musk was wrong about me? What if I'm just another failure? But then he remembered Musk's challenge. You asked for this. Thomas wiped his face and forced himself to get back to work. Slowly, the machine began to take shape under his hands, and by evening it worked as if it were brand new. The customer, an elderly woman named Teresa, hugged him when she saw it. You have no idea what this means to me, she said, slipping him a $50 bill. Moments like that fueled him. They reminded him why he was doing this, not just to survive, but to rebuild a life with purpose and pride. Then something unexpected happened. A local journalist, intrigued by the handwritten signs around town, stopped by to interview him. Thomas hesitated, unsure if he wanted his story out there, but the journalist's genuine interest won him. Over a week later, the article was published with the headline, From Homeless to Hopeful: How a Repair Shop is Changing One Man's Life. The piece went viral, shared across social media platforms and local news outlets. People were captivated by his journey, and the calls came flooding in. Donations, repair requests, and messages of encouragement poured in. Thomas's little repair shop became a symbol of second chances, and he wasn't going to waste it. The article lit a spark that Thomas never anticipated. Within days, his phone rang constantly. People from across San Francisco and even beyond were reaching out, not just to request repairs, but to share their own stories of struggle and triumph. His tiny storage unit became a hub of activity, filled with repaired items waiting for pickup and donations of tools and supplies from strangers inspired by his journey. One day, a man dropped off a pristine, barely used toolbox. Saw your story, he said. Thought you could use this better than I could. Thomas thanked him, stunned by the generosity. It wasn't just about the toolbox, it was a reminder of how far he'd come from that street corner. The article caught the attention of a local TV station, and soon Thomas found himself in front of a camera for a segment titled Turning 20,000 into a Future. The reporter asked about Musk's role in his transformation, and Thomas didn't shy away from the truth. Elon didn't just give me money. He said he gave me a reason to believe in myself again. But the work that's on me. The segment aired during prime time, and by the next morning, Thomas's story had gone national. Social media erupted with debates and praise. Some lauded Musk's unconventional act of philanthropy, while others questioned if the billionaire could be doing more for people like Thomas. Amid the noise, Thomas focused on what mattered, keeping his business running and staying true to the promise he'd made one evening. As Thomas was packing up for the day, a familiar car rolled up to the curb outside his storage unit. He froze, heart pounding, as the Tesla door opened and Elon Musk stepped out, this time wearing a navy hoodie and sneakers. Elon, Thomas said, stunned. What are you doing here? Musk smiled faintly. Thought I'd check in. You've been busy. Thomas gestured to the chaos of the unit, a mix of repaired gadgets, donated items, and tools scattered across the workbench. It's not much, he said, but it's a start. Musk nodded approvingly. I've been following your progress, he said. You've done more with that $20,000 than some people do with $1 million. How does it feel? Thomas hesitated, searching for the right words. It feels like I'm finally living again, like I'm not invisible anymore for a moment. Musk was silent, his gaze scanning the room. Then he turned back to Thomas. You've proved yourself now. Let's take this to the next level. Thomas's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Musk pulled a checkbook from his pocket. Consider this an investment, he said, scribbling quickly before handing the check to Thomas. His hands trembled as he read the number. 100,000. I want you to expand. Musk said simply, hire people, teach others what you've learned. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about creating opportunities for others. Thomas stared at the check, tears welling in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep going. Musk replied, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity with Musk's investment. Thomas moved his repair business out of the storage unit and into a modest storefront on a busy street. He hired 2 employees, people who had been in situations similar to his own, and trained them in the art of fixing what others had given up on. The shop became more than a business. It became a community space where people came not just to repair their items, but to share their stories. Thomas set up a donation jar by the counter, with all proceeds going toward helping others who were struggling to find their footing. News outlets continued to cover his journey, and Thomas was invited to speak at local events about resilience and second chances. His once harsh voice softened with confidence as he spoke to audiences, always ending with the same message. You're never too far gone to turn things around one day. A young boy came into the shop with a broken RC car as Thomas worked on it. The boy asked, "Do you ever see the man who helped you? The one who gave you the money?" Thomas smiled sometimes, but the real help was inside me all along. He just reminded me it was there. The boy grinned as the car whirred back to life. Thomas handed it back to him, feeling the same sense of purpose he had when he first repaired Victor's microwave. Only now, it wasn't just about surviving, it was about giving back.